The way that light interacts with a crystalline material is a fun effect to paint. It's also a neat addition for things like environments, creatures, and prop design, especially for fantasy. Here's what you should know, and how I like to go about adding it to my work. Crystalline materials are refractive, meaning that sunlight hitting it will enter the object, and when it does, rather than traveling directly through, the light ray will be bent and sometimes split different ways. Basically, or at least how I like to think about it, the more chaotic that light behaves inside a crystal, the more sparkly it can look. This sparkliness is called luster, which you'll typically see more of on cut and polished gems. In order to render a gem with more luster, it needs to have a very high contrast, meaning a very dark and light. These light and dark areas should also be scattered randomly, rather than having the light values on just the side where the light is hitting like most objects would. This happens because of light reflecting against the walls of the gem on the inside as well as the outside. You can see light hitting all sides of the material, rather than just the side facing you. One more thing that adds to the sparkling effect is dispersion, which is when a gem splits light into multiple colors. This means including flecks of a variety of colors that don't match either the color of the light or the color of the gem. A more rough, natural-looking crystal will have less randomness in its interaction with light. The brightest side is going to be the one facing the light source. This area is also not usually very saturated compared to the rest of the crystal, or more specifically, it's not green like the rest of the crystal is here, instead reflecting mostly just the color of the light itself and not the color of the object. The light that enters or is visible through the crystal, however, will appear a very saturated green, and here is visible on the opposite side from where the light is coming from, kind of like the light passed through the material and soaked up the color on its way. An important thing to take away here is that the lightest value area and the second lightest value area can be on opposite sides of the object. It's pretty easy to quickly paint a convincing crystal-looking material by just replicating this effect. The shadow cast from an object like a crystal will also be unique. Normally, a cast shadow would be darkest, closer to the object it belongs to, but in this case, it will generally be the opposite. The darker areas will be at the edges of the shadow because of the light coming through the crystal and lighting the cast shadow up. It will also color the cast shadow with the color of the crystal, in this case red. For a very sparkly gem being hit directly by light, the sparkles can be projected onto the surrounding surfaces. You can also sometimes see the light splitting rainbow colors effect here as well, although that's not a necessary detail to include. Especially for gemstones that are cut into specific, detailed patterns, figuring out where to start can be pretty confusing and intimidating. After creating a flat, solid shape, I prefer to start loose and rough with a painterly brush to get a good base. Then with a polygonal lasso tool, some sharper shapes can be added on top. Rather than creating every single individual side, called the facets, you only really need a few clear ones, and then the rest can be implied by the rougher detail. I wouldn't worry too much about achieving the perfect, symmetrical patterns of a cut gemstone, especially when painting. There may be times where you do want to be more exact and show every facet clearly, but in most cases, like if it isn't a super close-up focal point, it wouldn't be worth the trouble. On natural crystals in particular, I like the look of adding lighter value edges here and there. It makes the edges more pronounced, and maybe a bit worn-looking. You can also draw in other lighter and darker details, imperfections like cracks, air pockets, and scuff marks. Doing this adds an extra bit of realism and prevents the material from looking too plasticky. If you want any part of the material to be semi-transparent, an easy way to do that is to duplicate the layer, decrease the opacity of the lower one, and then on the upper layer, erase away the areas where you want what's behind to show through. An optional final touch is to create a new layer set to the overlay blending mode and clipping into the crystal layer. With whatever brush you want, could be sharp or soft, smooth or textured, you can paint with brighter and or darker colors to add a slight amount of more vibrancy. Other blending modes can also do cool looking and useful things, so feel free to experiment. Here's another video you might like. Thanks Patreon members for supporting the creation of these tutorials, and thanks for watching.